For far too long, churches have been missing the mark with mental health, and whether it's misdiagnosing the issues or just flat out ignoring them, we need to step it up. So in this video, we're going to debunk 5 of the biggest myths that Christians believe about mental health. First, we need to get rid of this idea that Christians shouldn't struggle with mental illness. People may say, you shouldn't feel down because you have so much to be thankful for, or don't be depressed, just go to God, or you just need to have faith. And while there may be some truth mixed in there, these statements are misguided and incomplete, making these messages hurtful rather than helpful. Now, I realize that sinful choices and bad decisions can result in a bad mindset. Things like bitterness, anger, and negativity will all rob you of your peace. But just because you're hurting doesn't automatically mean that you're sinning, and the Bible never pretends that Christians don't struggle. In the Psalms, King David, Heman, and Asaph were depressed. Job and Jeremiah wished that they had never been born. And Elijah was so lonely, isolated, and discouraged that he asked God to kill him. And even Jesus himself was in such great agony that he sweat literal drops of blood. So this idea that Christians don't struggle is very wrong. The church should be the safest place for people to open up about their struggles, but often it's not. Sometimes we're afraid to be honest because we think that we'll be seen as less spiritual. And as Christians, we need to be changing this culture to where people feel comfortable opening up. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom. It's okay to admit that you're not okay, and expressing that you're hurting can be the strongest thing you can do. Being honest about it is the first step in recovery, because if you want to get help, the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that you need it. Next, many Christians will falsely say that depression is a sin. Depression is not a sin. Now, it may be possible that a person became depressed through some bad habits, such as complaining, isolation, inactivity, etc. But the depression itself is not a sin. It's possible to be doing everything right and still be depressed. And if this is you, it's not because God hates you or there's just something wrong with you. Depression may make you feel like you must be doing something wrong. And we might read verses like, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice," or "In thy presence is fullness of joy." And we might assume that if we're feeling down or sad, then we must be doing something wrong. But rejoicing is not the same as happiness. Rejoicing is an action, while happiness is a feeling. Now, rejoicing will definitely affect your happiness, but it will not totally guarantee it right away. When you're in a state of depression, you may wonder why. Why do I feel so hopeless? Why do I struggle but some others don't? Well, remember that we live in a sin-cursed world, and all of creation suffers because of the fall of mankind. So no matter who you are, life will not be perfect or easy. Depression is not a sin. Next, some Christians believe that mental health struggles are a sign of weak faith, and that a person who's suffering just needs to trust God. This stigma causes some Christians to live in guilt and shame because of their struggles, because it makes them think that if they were a better Christian, then they wouldn't suffer. And the pressure of this belief makes it even harder to be mentally healthy. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need faith, because you do, but faith is not just the cure-all for everything. Mental illness can be affected by brain chemistry, trauma, life circumstances, or other external causes, and it's a very nuanced thing. And it's a big mistake when we oversimplify and assume things. From my personal experience, there's been many times when I felt really anxious, even though I wasn't doubting God at the moment. Some factors may have been a lack of rest or sleep, a bad diet, a lack of activity, hormone balances, or many other things. And I've struggled with anxiety even when there was nothing that I was afraid of. Mental illness doesn't prove that you lack faith any more than happiness proves that you have it. And yes, it's true that faith will help, but we can't just assume that every problem is a result of doubting God. When Jesus was sweating drops of blood in the garden, a lack of faith wasn't his problem, and likewise, it might not be yours either. Some people say that a Christian shouldn't see a therapist. They'll say that instead, you should just go to God. People may see prayer and therapy as an either or, but really it can be a both and. Christianity and counseling don't have to compete with each other, they can complement each other. And while we should go to God, his design is for us to depend on others. The Bible says, "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." You may have heard that you should really watch out for counselors and therapists because they might give you the wrong advice or tell you something false. And while that is true, that could equally be said about listening to pastors or other Christian leaders. It's not wrong to seek professional help. If you want to be a better athlete, you get a trainer. If you're struggling with school, you get a tutor. If you're sick, you go to a doctor. If you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. But sometimes those who suffer mentally or emotionally are just told to get over it. But if it's not wrong to go to a medical doctor for physical health, why is it wrong to go to a professional counselor for mental health? As Christians, we need to end the stigma that it's wrong to see a therapist. And this final myth is in line with the last one, and it's that Christians should never take medication for mental illness. Here's a misconception that taking medicine means that you believe that God can't heal you, but nobody ever says that it's wrong to take Tylenol for a headache or back pain, and yet when it comes to mental health, then they'll say that you should just trust God and let Him heal you. But if it's not doubting God to take medicine for physical health, why would it be to take medicine for mental health? Now, I certainly wouldn't suggest relying on medication as soon as you start to experience a problem, and I think it's a big mistake to only use medicine and not make any healthy lifestyle choices or spiritual decisions. But for many people, medication can be an important part of treatment and managing symptoms. We do need to trust and rely on God, but taking medication doesn't contradict that. I think that when it comes to mental health, God can offer us help through multiple different ways. It may come in the form of therapy, medication, support groups, or other ways, but sometimes we reject these in the name of just trusting God, not realizing that God wanted to help us through some of these opportunities. So what's a myth about mental health that you once believed, and how did you come to realize what the truth was? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more.